8 shots, no screen, and yet in 1994 the Apple QuickTake 100 was the future of consumer digital photography. It's obsolete technology no one uses today, but I'll bring it back to life. I'm the Vintage Collector and these are my stories. In 1975, Kodak engineers built a lab prototype that recorded a black and white image to a cassette tape. It wasn't pretty, but it proved you could capture photos without film. By the early 1980s, Sony and Canon pushed electronic still video cameras that saved analog frames to tiny 2-inch floppy disks. By 1991, Dicam brought the Dicam Model 1, later sold by Logitech as the Photoman. It offered only a resolution of 376 by 240 pixels at 8-bit grayscale. Still, it was a big leap forward, as suddenly digital camera meant files you could pull onto your computer through serial transfers. And then Apple stepped in. At Macworld Tokyo in 1994, Apple revealed the QuickTake 100. Co-developed with Kodak and built by Jinon, it tried to make digital photography simple and colorful for the masses.
Simple lens, look through the viewfinder, point and click, and it will take your picture.
8 photos at 640 by 480 pixels, or 32 at 320 by 240. All in 24-bit color, stored in 1 MB of internal flash. No memory cards, no screen, you'd shoot first and discover the results later on your Mac. Very much like in the good old days of analog film photography. Retail price $749. That's equivalent to roughly $1,600 in 2025. And while it sounds like a lot, it was a real bargain when compared to professional high-end gear like the Kodak DCS-100. The latter recorded digital images to a 200 MB SCSI hard drive and retailed for $20,000 in 1991, with contemporary models like the DCS-400 asking for $35,000 in 1995. The QuickTake 150, released just 1 year later, introduced support for standard JPEG, bitmap, TIFF and PCX formats. Still the same binocular-styled form factor like its predecessor, it allowed to store up to 16 images at 640 by 480 resolution. But not because they bumped up the internal flash, but because of using better compression algorithms. Owners of the QuickTake 100 could send it in to Apple and have it upgraded for just $200. It came back with a new label, the QuickTake 100 Plus, now feature equivalent to the QuickTake 150. Teaming up with Fuji in 1996, the QuickTake 200 would see a more traditional camera design, yet introducing a backside LCD as well as a smart media slot for storage cards. A hint of what would become standard, removable storage and instant review. Apple never disclosed QuickTake unit sales in its filings. Reviews called it groundbreaking, but sales were modest. And when Steve Jobs returned in 1997, the entire QuickTake line was quickly cut.
We also wanted to make it easier for you to take a quick video with QuickTake.
At least the term saw a reintroduction into the Apple universe in recent years as part of the built-in iPhone camera to capture instant movies. But let's head back to 1994 and the QuickTake 100. Originally released for Macintosh users only, it eventually saw Windows support by end of 1994. While the camera was the same, the box included a DB9 serial connection cable for the PC instead. You could fabricate one yourself if you really wanted to. For existing owners, a standalone connection kit was available, also including the PhotoNow software for Windows. Besides, various other accessories like a travel case or an extra battery booster pack was available. The latter featured a belt clip and simply plugged into the DC barrel socket of the camera and acted as an external power bank. The camera could also be powered using an external power adapter. However, there was no built-in charging capability, hence you had to still use the separate battery charger. As far as my camera is concerned, I didn't get all the accessories. The battery compartment's cover is missing, and so was the carrying strap and all the other default accessories, including the software. As for the missing battery compartment cover, well, I decided to make one myself, from scratch. So I modeled a replacement and did a few early test prints on a Zeepro Zim 3D printer that was kindly donated to the channel. But let's just say the Zim wasn't exactly in mint condition. My first prints were pure garbage, the full kit and caboodle of 3D printing misery. So I had to start repairing the printer itself. That repair story will get its own episode soon, but after a lot of effort, the Zim eventually produced a somewhat usable prototype part in plain PLA. However, for the final version I wanted something sturdy and more precise. And that's where today's sponsor PCBWay comes in. I uploaded my model through their online quoting system, selected resin printing, and a few days later the part arrived perfectly finished and dimensionally spot on. Here you can see my first PLA prototypes next to the final resin print. Since resin is rigid, a snapping mechanism wasn't an option. So I took a Dremel, carved out a small recess and glued in a neodymium magnet so it neatly attaches to that little screw inside the camera body. Big thanks to PCBWay for sponsoring this project and supporting the channel. And if you got your own parts to prototype, right now PCBWay is running their October special with discounts on TPU flexible materials. So if you've been waiting to try soft or flexible print, now's a great time to give it a go. During my research, I found the QuickTake project on GitHub, which allows use of the QuickTake on modern Windows and Mac OS. There's even a project which interfaces the QuickTake with the Apple II. And since it specifically mentions the Apple IIc and I just happen to have one of those, it might be an interesting follow-up to see my QuickTake connect to the Apple IIc at some point. However, I'm more into the original user experience right now, so I use the QuickTake software I eventually located on the Macintosh repository. Skipping Windows for now and targeting the Mac, I wanted to find out if my camera still works today. And that's where things got complicated. I first tried it on this blue and white Power Mac G3 running macOS 8.6. Even though others had reported errors, I installed the QuickTake 100 software anyway. And if only to show you this obscure error claiming there wasn't enough memory, quite ironic considering the G4 had 256 MB of RAM. Going for the QuickTake 150 software, this one yielded some setup impediments. The macOS release notes indicate a workaround, but even by following that procedure, I couldn't get the G3 to ultimately recognize my QuickTake camera. And even worse, using the QuickTake 200 software didn't yield any success either, as it's obviously not backwards compatible. So I went with this good old Performer 450. But apparently those disk images I found on the Macintosh repository couldn't be mounted with this copy. So I had to go the detour, trying to rewrite the disks from the G3, which mounted the disk images without any complaint. However, this copy obviously can't cope with USB floppy drives. So a daunting manual copying procedure began, from which I then saved myself some proper disk copies 6.3 images. At the end, I finally had a set of QuickTake disks functionally equivalent to the ones Apple users installed back in 1994. Time to connect the camera again. Now there's two ways how to connect to the QuickTake camera. There's the QuickTake setup control panel, which lets you mount the camera like an external storage medium to your desktop. From here you can simply copy the files over to your local hard disk. Or you run the QuickTake application, which will however refuse to work as long as the camera is still mounted as a volume. The QuickTake application will then load the thumbnails and you can inspect the pictures and apply some limited editing functions and of course transferring them over to the Mac. Given the serial connection, it takes quite some time, even though the image files are pretty small. The QuickTake application will offer to delete the images upon successful transfer, although in case you answered no here, there seems to be no way to delete individual images from the application. But you can when mounting the camera again as a volume. At least you have the camera controls also accessible from the Mac, so you could just trigger the erase all function from there the same way as you do on the camera itself. And no, you couldn't delete individual images from the camera itself either. How would you anyway, as there's no way to preview to select any given image. As for the controls, there's not much anyway. You can control the flash and have access to a 10 seconds timer. The upper right button controls the resolution, either 320 by 240 for low res or 640 by 480 for high res. Again, up to 8 high-res images or up to 32 low-res images could be stored on the QuickTake 100's internal flash memory. Back in 1994, reviews were mixed. Wired magazine praised the QuickTake's 24-bit color and the ease of just plugging it into your Mac. But the same review also noted that Apple's marketing photos were not actually taken with a QuickTake, which says a lot. Other magazines pointed out that indoor shots often looked flat and blurry. The flash worked only up to about 9 feet, and with a fixed focus starting at 4 feet, close-ups were out of the question. You also had to watch out for parallax shift. What you saw through the viewfinder wasn't always what the lens captured. Of course, I took some pictures myself, but handling them with a modern computer was not straightforward. There is at least one commercial program available today that can handle the QuickTake image format, Graphic Converter. But support seems to have come to an end. In the current release 12 it no longer works and only shows a blank window, while the previous version 11 still does. There's also the open source project DC Raw, which can convert the images, and I promptly installed it from Brew. For that purpose, I uploaded the original files through FTP. A small mistake, as Fetch converted them into Mac binary format, at which DC Raw would fail to convert them in the first place. I had to first decode the Mac binary files before running them through DC Raw. Using the -t argument, I asked it to create TIFF files right away. And finally, my modern Mac can display them in the preview app. Of course, you want to see the actual pictures, so here's some impressions. To the left, you'll see the original images, and to the right the same, with some minor white balance and contrast corrections applied. Not too bad for a 30 years old digital camera. My thanks and gratitude go to Thomas from Switzerland, who donated the QuickTake 100 to me. And I'm sorry it took me so long to finally get around to it, but I really had to build up an Apple collection first to give me a head start. What do you think about it? Did you ever come by the Apple QuickTake or any of the other early digital cameras, and how was your experience? Let me know in the comments below. I'm the Vintage Collector, and this was my story for today. Thanks for watching, and see you again next Sunday.